Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session from the Wiser Salon. And a happy new number! Because, of course, it's not a new year until 1st of April. But never mind, let's pretend. It's only halfway through the year, of course, really. But we have to pretend it's a new year. It's a new number. And that's about all there is to it. So, never mind. I hope you had a great season. I hope you got to relax. I certainly did. I've relaxed over this period like I've never relaxed before. It's been rather spiffing, I have to say. So I've right enjoyed myself. It's not often I get to relax and chill out and lie on a settee. Usually sat in this chair. Not this year. I've had some good chills. So, we've had a good season. We've had snow today. Only a couple of weeks late or a week late, but never mind. We've got snow. So, what's been going on? Well, the trumpet. What's he gone and done? Well, he's only gone and attacked Venezuela, which is odd. Now we know that the people of Venezuela don't like the guy. I get that. We know that America has a bill to pay in this month. We get that. Sounds low, okay. I think it's probably because I'm a little bit away from the old gig. So if I stick that there, is that any better? How's that? So they have a bill to pay. Oil is, of course, what they're claiming, as well as they need to remove this communist. Communist. It's interesting when you consider that South America is basically Catholic. So they're all Christians, you might say. And they've gone and put some strange creature in. Which, that's the wrong one. And that's the wrong one. And where's the right one? No, that's not it either. No. What the hell have I done with it? Well, I put it in somewhere. I don't know where I've put it. Better saying that. Thank you very much. Somebody else is giving me a text. I'll just have to check this just to make sure I'm not doing so much stupid. And we get the thumbs up. So, obviously, it's the position of the mic. It's very important, obviously, the position of this mic. Well, for the price of it, you'd expect it to pick up a little bit better than it does from a bit of a distance. But I just don't like it in my face because you can hear every breath I take. I nearly broke into song there, but we didn't. So, I've lost my image. Where the hell did I put it? Go on, George. So, I'm really good at this. Oh, no, let's be quite honest. I am good at it. Oh, unless it comes secondary after that. Now, look at here. What we've found. We always find it around the American presidents, but now we've found it to our Emperor Keir Starmer, or Jimmy Savile's vagina, as we like to call him. There we go. Meet the new president of Venezuela, talking to the Roman wall, wearing a small hat. Roman wall. And it is a Roman wall. It's got nothing to do with Jericho or any such nonsense. And who have we got on here called Gary Peters? Mods. I'll have a check of that one. Somebody's excited. There we go. We now have an image of an emperor of the UK with those Chabad Lubavitch rabbinical Jews. And theirs being implemented in Venezuela. Oh, says I, could this have something to do with the Noahide? I'd say absolutely. I mean, you've got South America. You know, you've got Argentina, all these big nations. All Christians. And they have no idea what this Noahide system is going to do in relation to dealing with Christians. Oh dear. I mean, are they going to kick it off there? I wonder. Interesting, to say the least. And it wouldn't be the first time, would it not, that the South Americans have had their heads kicked in by Europeans. So, not good. Not very happy about that. Nice one, guys. I don't know whether that's a bot or a very excitable imp on the old comments. He's still going on here. He's not gone rid of me on here. Timed out. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Give it a good long time out as well, because I don't think we're going to get much sense from that, to be frank. So, nice one. What is going on in South America? I don't like it. It's not fun. So are they going to test this no-hide system in relation to how they're going to deal with Christians in South America? Very interesting. Especially given, and I have mentioned this before, so way back in the midst of time when you could actually get lots of good stuff on the internet, I came across a diary of a torturer where it was a military program to pick out people who might want to have a dabble at torturing folk. And at the end of it, the guy in his diary made it clear that the people that were left were mainly South Americans. So, have they already prepped the hit squads, the death squads, the torture squads in South America? One does wonder. And especially when you consider the reason why the Jesuits were actually kicked out of the Vatican originally was because they created their own nation in South America, or Paraguay, without the need for the Vatican anymore, or rather Rome. That wouldn't do. So they obviously had a massive power base in there, because that went on for quite a long time. Then they got kicked out. Then they got picked up by the Prussians, the cause of all the wars that we've had, including World War One. Picked up by the Prussians via Catherine the Great, and then reinstituted into the Vatican by force on the back of the Napoleonic loss and the rise of the House of Rothschild over and above the British Empire. Although they've been involved in it for a lot longer than that, of course, through the East India Companies. But there we are. It just, South America, in that sign, you would have to say the Jesuits being shifted into something else. They already had their base for this shit show to spread itself right across South America. So one does worry slightly about what's actually going on in South America. But now we can see that the PCI Roman wall shagger has been installed. So you can clearly see that Trump, as the emancipator, King Cyril of the Babylonian system, is clearly putting all the men and women in place in readiness for this. In one day, as the protocols depicted, they're going to shut the entire world down and put it under the Sanhedrin, run by psychopaths who ate everybody. It's not good. So that's not a good start to the new number, is it? So we need to keep our eyes out there on that. We've got this real build-up of, moves against Russia with our military being used as a pawn. It seems to be the biggest force around in that area at the moment. Active. It's not good. And there's Stormer with his friends. And I think that's the first I've seen of one of our Chalker Westminster gangsters sat around Chabad Lubavitch. So there we can now see that they've got enough control over this country in relation to changing it and shifting it. They've got a very strange pretend monarch. And of course, that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're not going to get too excited and bedded down in data like we have done for quite a while. It's still the season. We're still going to have some jollies. So we'll just go through a few things that I've put together over the months in order just to support and evidence a lot of the things I've said in relation to history of these isles. And of course, without presenting the evidence at that time. So we're going to give you a little bit of evidence. And specifically what I want to give some credence to is what I've said in relation to my findings over the years, in how all of a sudden a dark monarch gets shoved in the mix, or a dark power player, and it gets missed, and how they've shifted from the monarchs of right or by right into this new system, eventually getting Henry VII on there, leading to the psychopath and woman shagger and killer Henry VIII. So, I have talked about this a lot, and I've never really presented any evidence to say why I see it like this. So tonight I think we'll just tot along and just present a bit of that so we can get a better picture, so you know that I'm not just taking the piss. It all is based on real stuff. But of course, if you study the history of the victors, which is most of history out there, or you listen to the academics, you're not getting that picture at all. In fact, you're getting the opposite, and they obfuscate that at every turn. So that everybody just assumes it's a continuum. And of course, people say, well, yes, 1066, yes, we got this, the Plantagenet. We did. We did indeed. And that was a foreign force, again, on the land. But not much difference in the sense that we already under Dane law, as well as English law. But and of course, Normans were, they were ancestor being Rollo. You still have a Viking input, but they were Angevins. Aquitaine, they were a different kettle of fish, a different breed, a different mix. But they did, once they taken over, did comply with the then existing common laws. And then they had a bit of a shenanigans going on. And eventually, the common law became cemented in the Great Charter, or the Magna Carta, which gave then man, which was not the peasants, of course, because they were illiterate, the rights to keep the king in check. So it wasn't so much a divine right of kings as at that stage. It was a king in the spirit of England, which was the sovereignty of the people, were placed into the monarch, who upheld the agreed common laws, and it all went spiffing. And then, of course, it didn't go spiffing. We had the Crusades, we had King John, we had the sheriffs, we had all this stealing of estates by having them appointing trustees when they went off hoity-toity. Which, in truth, if you study the origin of the Crusades, it was pretty essential, because the Muslims were slaughtering all over the show, invaded something like 28 countries in space of, 5 years. It really was. There was a need to buffer those Saracens, as they were called back in those days. And so we had the Crusades. But again, they were formulated from Byzantium, which we've discussed was a different Rome to the Western Rome. There were two completely different theologies, two completely different ideas. The Eastern Rome having a lot of the old imperial side from Babylon and from Samaria, and the Western Rome, of course, having this civilization that was a lot bigger than they give us credit for. Hence, the Second World War and the First World War, which was basically an attempt to destroy the architecture that presented a more, let's say, evolved civilization than the one that these creatures from over there in the East were pushing all over the shop. Of course, had to be done so that they could convince the last 100-year generations that actually this pseudoscience, So Einstein, Royal Society, this idea of psychology and psychiatry, all this pseudoscience that we've all been whitewashed with, could prove that we were actually evolving as a species. So once they got rid of the architecture across Europe, World War II, that became a lot easier. And of course, the biggest victims of that was the baby boomers, who still today, loose lips, sink ships, and keep your trap shut and do as you're told. Still that attitude filled the secret societies. And as we know, the rest is story and reality. Generation X being sidelined because they've programmed the new ones. They want to cajole the new ones to get into the military on a gap year, building it up. But remember, the bogeyman Putin is just a screenplay to militarize European nations. Okay, it's not to say they might not have a conflict with Russia. They could very well do. A nuclear conflagration is on the cards if that plan goes ahead, whether that be in the Middle East or whether it be on UK, for instance, given these the Crown or the Privy Toilet Council today are doing everything they can to piss the living daylights out of Putin. So we're becoming a target just on the fact of the national security, as they call it, of the commanders at British Army, RAF and Navy's level, or in sync with politicians in the Commons and in the Lords. So it's pretty clear that this country has been completely enveloped by the very system that back in the day the British Army and the Crown were claimed to be fighting against, which was communism. Of course, that's overturned when you study the work of Dr. John Coleman, ex-MI6. Not the John Coleman that people see today on the internet with this book script. We're not talking about him. You know, he's a shill. We're talking about a guy who were in MI6 back in the 60s and 70s. He was sent to the Congo, he believed, to fight the installation of communist regimes, only to find that the British intelligence service, Mossad, CIA, et al., was in fact installing communist regimes, socialist regimes, everywhere they colonised or got power and interfered with. So we know that at some point, whether it was a fad that the state was against communism back in the 1920s, or indeed at that point they hadn't quite taken the mantle. But post-World War II, then that's exactly what the entire intelligence establishment have been doing, installing communist regimes everywhere. Like you'd lump it, there was only one organisation on this earth that opposed communism, and that was the Church of Rome, Western. It was the only institution that opposed communism, and while it had power, it managed to keep it at bay. This is why you get so many Catholic inclusions into the Third Reich, because that was a fight against Bolshevism. And you know, people don't like it, but it is a fact. If you look at that, there was only one institution opposing communism. That's changed since Vatican II, of course. So it's just the situation, it's where we're at. But I think until we start to recognise the reality of these things and the real players of these organisations, institutions, before they were completely enveloped, then you lose sight of you don't know who the enemy is anymore. That's the trouble. If you don't know who the enemy is anymore, then you can't pull together anything to oppose it anymore either. And that's deliberate, of course. The film The Matrix, well, he said it made it very clear, did the architect, did he not? They've been doing this for a long time, and they're very good at it. Well, they have. They've been doing it for thousands of years. It's just our turn. Interesting stuff. But so Venezuela, it's not what people think it is. As much as the people in Venezuela itself are pleased to have rid of this guy, things are not as they seem, and this is definitely just Trump emancipating the Second Temple in readiness to implement this no-hide system over everybody. And it's unfortunate that people just still refused to see the real game, especially those who have been trapped through the secret societies, who should know better. But unfortunately, that is where we are. That is the state of play. And it's moving along quite jolly well, I have to say. So they're happy. People think that it's cracking, it's good. You know, all this nonsense, oh, we are executing. Well, you're not executing anybody, you bunch of tossers. The only people probably getting executed are the people that oppose it. So they've been the good guys, really. So you really got to be careful what you watch out there in law land, because there is so much knowledge, garbage to confuse people, because that works. You know, confusion means you can't fix anything. And again, like I said, nobody knows who the enemy is anymore, because it seems to be all sides playing in this and moving in this system, communist or capitalist. It's all the same thing, two sides of the same coin. And we've discussed that many times. So tonight we'll just have a nip through some bits of data just to support a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about over these years on the live streams, so you can see that it does have value. You can make your own mind up, of course, but I do believe it's correct. And history tells us so. So, who's joined us? John says, hello, Sean. Oh, hello, Jorn. Kerry says, Happy New Year. Love from Ireland. Love back to Ireland. Upward says, good evening, fellow wise asylumers. And Sean, looking forward to tonight's live stream. Evening, Upward. Hope you're all well. Says Upward again. Paul says, good evening, Sean, and fellow inmates. Evening to you, Paul. Friar Dougal. Good evening, Friar Dougal, and welcome. David Irving spoke the absolute truth. God bless him. They tried to lock him up for it. They did, and I believe he's quite poorly at the moment, which is unfortunate. But his work lays it out pretty clear. We were all duped. Everybody was duped back in those days, and they've been continued to be duped. And now I've been watching over this season a rerun of the Peaky Blinders. It's an exceptionally brilliant eye into the post-World War One situation here on Blighty. You know, and for people who think that us here on the British Isles lived the life of Raleigh through the Industrial Revolution, you just watch that. You know, the thick poverty. It were outrageous. There were no green and pleasant land in any of the cities and in the industrial areas on this island. And that went on for 3 centuries. You know, I mean, it's a lot cleaner now. They've got rid of it, but it's only moved somewhere else. The same will happen to you down the line once they've used you up, as it were. But just for an insight into what it was like, it were filthy, it were poor, they were nothing. You know, I think the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and let's say halfway through the 90s maybe, that is the best period of time that's been had on these islands, probably since before the Industrial Revolution, well, probably before the Civil War, I would say. Not that we know that it were great for people without means then, but, you know, this idea that the empire, its people live in luxury, is quite a nonsense. The elite live in luxury, but the people live in abstract poverty, as is the case all over the world. So it really is. It's not about one nation and people against another nation of people. It's really about all the people recognising that we have one enemy, and they have all the toys. It's always been so. And that's what gives them power. And it's also what makes you out there suck shit out their ass, because you want to be them, join them, and you want them to give you some prizes to make you feel good. So, evening, Friar Dougal. John says, good vid to all. Good vid to all. Okay, Jorn. June says, evening, Sean and chat. Evening, June. PY Music says, good evening. Evening, Paul. Mew says, all the best for the rest of the year, inmates. Hi, Sean. Snow falls on this Sunday evening. It does. Is it still snowing? It were this afternoon. Upward says, Mew, you okay? Okay. Upward says, liking the beard. Oh, well, thank you very much. It's still prickly. It is like having a wire brush sticking out your face. So I'm trying to play with it. I did wreck it with my little new buzzing machine the other week, so it needs to grow a bit on top, and then I'll get it shaped. I do think it looks alright when it's quite well shaped. It just needs a bit more growth around here because it prickles, and I'm constantly scratching. I've always got to wash it. I'm constantly washing it in warm water because it just prickles. It drives me up the wall. Because if it carries on, it's coming off. I'm not wearing this fuzzy face gig if it's uncomfortable. I mean, I have to say, I do like it. It does look it makes me look a little bit different. And I do quite like it, but not if it's going to be an itchy wire brush session all the time. So, and then if you eat anything, it seems to collect on the air. Just even the smell of it, it just aggravates it. I don't know how these people do it like they do, because it just aggravates me to death. So it's just getting it at the right length, so it doesn't curl over and start pricking the daylights out of me. I think I'm getting somewhere with it, to be honest. But well, thanks for that. Where are we here? Oh, I've got lost. Oh, I've got totally lost here. Right, here we go. Oh, there we go. Mr. Jim Drinsky. Good evening, Mr. Jim Drinsky. Hi, Sean, evening all, says he. Anthony Thomas says, evening, Governor, evening, friends, and hello, chat. Good evening to you, Anthony. John says, Donald Trump doesn't want suit he wears. Donald Trump. John, are you on the plonk? You badden. Jerry says, yes, better. Sound. Thanks, Jerry. Francis Booton. Okay, evening to you, Francis. So what happens next? Well, what do you mean by that? You mean... Well, so basically, as I see it, Donald Trump being the emancipator of the Second Temple, as he was for the Second Temple, which was installing a Babylonian control system over the tribes that followed the Mosaic Law in the Middle East and a bit further beyond. Babylon got its temple in as an oversoul to those tribes, but they operated the Talmud, the Zohar, and it was pushed together in the Mishnah in order that Babylon then started to take control over the then Mosaic Law. So King Cyrus emancipated those captive, or the tribe that were consistently abusing the followers of the Mosaic Law and trying to get them to follow their psychotic leader. And of course, everybody had to deal with that through their priesthood alone. So it wasn't like they were just like offering to amalgamate or jump on board for agreements. They basically wanted full takeover, and every other nation had to operate under their priesthood as the only facilitator to their oversoul. So that's basically what we're at. And he emancipated those captives once they'd been taken out of there because they were causing too much trouble, known as the Judeans or Judahites. No such term as Jew, remember, back then. And he pulled them back to build a temple. So he opened the gates for that. They call him the Emancipator, King Cyrus. And then he was swiftly knocked off by Scythian Queen Tomarin, or Tomaris, I can't remember exactly, because he was very naughty and he killed his son. It was then pulled together fully under the next leader of that system, and Babylon installed itself in. Now, so if we're referencing today, the Third Temple is a system, and it's a system by which they intend to take what is into their hands into a new trust called the Noahide Laws, which is for only non-rabbinical Jews. And there's a distinction between rabbinical Jews and the people that follow the Torah. even though over these centuries it's sort of mixed itself in together, and no better than the Christians who think they're Zionists, there are now Jews or followers of the Torah who also take on the Talmud. So everybody's screwed. All traditions have been sort of poisoned, and people don't know their ass from their elbow. So it's a similar situation. Trump's been classed as King Cyrus in Israel. They've minted coins, and he is now emancipating this system. So installing this new president in Venezuela is exactly that. In the same manner, it was being carried out under Biden. In the same way, it was being carried out under Boris Johnson, Cameron, Thatcher, etc. It doesn't matter who's in power. While those people here run the show, it doesn't matter what face you've got standing up there talking head, giving it large. The power, the system, the theology is coming through these rabbinical Jews, through some extremely sinister cults, based entirely in the efforts of Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank. Their theology was to do sin to bring in the Messiah. So this is where your paedophilia, your homosexuality, your incest, this is where all murder, sacrifice, all comes from this theology. And in its latest expression, it was the Rebbe who died not that long ago, and he was the man that tapped Benzion Milikowski, today known as Benjamin Netanyahu, to become a war leader, to push forward this bringing forward of the Messiah through doing bad things, very naughty things, which, if you take a look out there today, is pretty clear he's doing a bloody good job. And Trump has just bigged him up for that and said he's the best war president that's ever been. And he should be exonerated or pardoned, he says, by the Israeli courts. So it's pretty clear who Trump is. I know a lot of Americans are still enamored by him, probably because they're just paying attention to what he's doing domestically. If things are starting to look better, then that's what they focus to. But the bigger picture, of course, Donald Trump is emancipating this Noahide system, which is basically stealing the estates of all Christendom by deception, and that's been done on creating an ens legis, as we call it, or a entity that's subject to legislation, which we know as the short form birth certificate, or your Christian name fixed to the father's surname. And that is the method. So you've got the divine sovereignty given to you by the Heavenly Father, or the Father of the beginnings, let's say, which creates an estate that then the crown takes in trust, which is where original England came into play on the monarch. Not divine right from God, but a right of the people. Of course, we don't hear that term very much these days because people are all persons, which is the ens legis. So they've done a lot of work in shifting us off titles, our estates. So the Civil War is a part of that. The installation of William of Orange was a big part of that. And then, of course, the bankruptcies that took place, taking us off the gold standard, and then placing those birth certificates on the stock market and trading us as the collateral for the fiat currency system, which is why it's backed with nothing. It's not backed with gold. It's actually backed with our estates. Now, as I understand it, it would work in this way. The sovereign rights are taken into trust by the crown. There is your common law estate. That would be the creditor to the Bank of England. So the Bank of England takes the credit from our estate, which has been converted through the bankruptcies, and then we have this thing called a front trust corporation called the United Kingdom, which takes its credit, as the Treasury takes its credit from the Bank of England. So to the United Kingdom corporate system, we are not the creditors as people, as man, because of course we're all coming through as person or the ens legis, which is what the UK corporation actually has administration rights over. So when we shout at them and saying you can't do this, we're the creditor, we're not actually the creditor in their closed system. The only creditor that they see is the Bank of England. In truth, we are the creditor. But remember, theirs is a closed system. It's admiralty law, and it's the very facilitator that's turned man into a human, which is then afforded all the rights of personage. Now, that is coming out of the Catholic Church since the Solomons took it over, and Vatican II being the pinnacle of that takeover, and they installed this, what you might call rabbinical Judaism system inside the Vatican. So we're seeing what comes next is ever moving forward to fix our estates into this Noahide system by consent, of course. Ignorance is consent. Yeah. Speaking nothing, keeping quiet is consent. If you don't rebut it, you've consented. Okay, that's the way their game works. So that's what they're doing. Now they want to replace the white race, of course, with these subcultures who don't know their ass from their elbow. They only know what the cock tells them they have to do, which we can see clearly. So this is just installing dumbasses, and the Kalergi plan gives you that picture quite clearly. They just want dumb screwballs that do exactly what they're told. So they are replacing the very cultures that created these common law estates, if you will, and right by ancestry to the land and all the systems and structures that were built on that land by our ancestors. They need to get rid of it. It's called replacement. They've gone a long way down the line, especially after the book script. Now, war is the next phase. Now, people think, because they're supposed to do, that it's going to be with Russia. But actually what they're doing is militarizing all the Western nations, and in readiness for this move by Israel to attack Iran, which, of course, is going to drag China, and Russia's already backing it. And there you're going to get your Third World War. So, again, that is for one and one reason only. As you can see now with this gap year that they've presented, it is to conscript the remainder of the white males. And indeed, your native blacks as well, because they're the same kind of mindset as us, because they've been here for a long time. I don't class them as Africans. They might have an African origin way back in the midst of time, but for generations they've been born here. And it is a case of they need now to remove the males from the civilized countries so that these subcultures can find the balls and basically rape to death, or just to produce a mixed race against the females. And people don't realise that. They need to get rid of the white males, and then all the females, all these feminists, I could do it my fucking self, I'm just fantastic, me, toxic male, everything's toxic. They're going to be in for a shock of their life, basically. And I've got to say, it's well-deserved. I mean, if it comes to pass, let's say, I don't want it to come to pass, but let's say it does. They deserve everything that's coming to them for destroying the family unit, for thinking putting foreskins into their lips is a good idea, for thinking that long nails, looking like black people, is an interesting and valid sort of activity, and what they were born for. You know, no amount of talk and chat from sensible people is changing their mind, but the universe will change their mind. Unfortunately, there'll be no getting out of that trap if it plays out to that end. Of course, I don't wish it to do that, and all that I do is in an attempt to awaken people to the situation so that it doesn't take place. And hopefully people are starting to actually now get a grip. You know, face yourself, face your own nonsense, and then we can get somewhere. But instead, everybody projects it out on, well, their nonsense is it's more important that I tell them off and tell them what they're doing wrong, blah, 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 than look at what I'm doing wrong. Fine, carry on. It's just not going to work. And you're not going to get anywhere. So that's what's coming next. In fact, it's on. Emancipate this system. Get the system fixed in Jerusalem. They want their embassy. Everybody's embassies in Jerusalem. They're going to replace the existing United Nations. I think, unless some other sort of organisation starts to raise its head, I think what they've done is, and it's been an intent from the get-go, is to actually form the World Health Organization, because this is a medical dictatorship that they're implementing, into the new rabbinical Judaic governing world body to replace the United Nations. And of course, for that, the WHO would have to be then centred in Jerusalem. So that's how I see the picture playing out. But of course, we're going to have to see how that's going to pan. It will depend entirely on how well the public go with it, or how well the public rebel against it. And that is the key to this. Rebellion, rebuttal is essential. And, you know, we're not in a position now where we can have a totally peaceful rebellion to this. It's too far gone. It's way too far gone. They've installed so many subcultures. They've emptied the prisons in Kazakhstan, in Turkey, Pakistan, and everywhere else, and they've emptied them here. The French are now saying that any English that they find stopping these migrants from crossing are going to get arrested. I mean, what does that tell you? Who controls France? The same people that control the British Crown. So they're the same. France and UK have been the same for a very long, since the Hanoverians were shoved on the throne by the Prussians. Yeah, the Hanseatic League, as it was once called, then became the Prussian military. And once they took over Prussia. So this is basically where we're at. This is what's coming next, and that is, you can see that everywhere. In everywhere you look, that's what you'll see. So that's the answer to that question. Where are we there? Where are we now? What happens next? That's from France Bouton. Okay, welcome. Jerry says, hey, Sean and all in the Wise Asylum. Evening, Jerry. Pedram says, evening all. Evening, Pedram. Family album, says Jerry. Oh, right, yeah. I suppose that's to one of them images. John gives it the black hand, or brown hand. South America going to get Kalergid. Well, I don't like what's going to start taking place, I don't think, down in there in South America. It's really not funny. And I don't think the people have a clue. They really have no clue. Or at least it would appear that way. I don't know how it's going to pan. I just checked out his channel, Paul. He was lippy last week, says Mew. She's Mew. Paula says, hiya Sean and everyone. Evening, Paula. Weefy Man says, Happy New Year. Evening, people, not persons. Evening, Weefy Man. PY says, thanks, Mew. No worries. Treen, hi Sean and all. Hope you had a great break. I did indeed, Treen, and I hope you did the same. I've been picking up your emails. Pedram says, watch Mossad agent Perez Shakdam at Tusi TV yesterday. She said, the globalist cult is looking for a replacement for Islamic State being kicked out of Iran. As of now, beware, they might invade England. Well, that is the plan. That is the plan. And unless the white male's here. You see, it's clever as well how the military are playing, how the command level are playing to recoup veterans here. And using the government as a method of that, by saying they're going to attack and disband and all this malarkey with the SAS and all this stuff, which it's just to re-bolster military, but back under command. This is the problem. What we actually need is for all veterans and people of that mindset to start to recognise, actually, it's going to have to be a banding together outside of the control of the command structure until the command structure shows itself worthy. There's no more succor in feeling safe being part of the old institution. The only way that it's going to work is for everybody that's been in the institution, that is in the institution, that can see what's going on, to recognise that we are our own institution if we're going to go down that path, not dependent on that. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to deal with this massive influx of screwballs that have been financed, trained by so-called our intelligences. So that's ISIL, ISIS, Taliban, even Mujahideen if they're still about. But and they've poured them into this country, poured them in. So we're in for interesting times, regardless. Simon Lee says, "Caught my third live ever. All the best, everyone. I saw a clip of X today where Nathan Rothschild was congratulating Trump. Speaks for itself, doesn't it just? I mean, it's quite ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, as soon as I saw that new president thing, I just thought, oh, there we go. Because previous to that, I'd thought it's because there's a bill owing to the IMF this month by America, and we do know that Venezuela has got a lot of silver, a very lot of silver, just like he had back in the day when the galleons were nicking it, and then Queen Elizabeth I were nicking it off the galleons and building the Protestant Empire, which were never really separate from the Roman Empire, just split itself in two. Evening, Simon. Pedram says, she added that the Palestinian flag is being pushed as Islamic Caliphate flag. She had infiltrated absolute clerics' inner chambers. She has insider info. I think she might be onto something. Oh, well, that's interesting. What's she called? Perez Shakdam. Okay. Interesting. I don't think I've heard of her. Thanks for that, Pedram. Paul says Stormer's beard is a smaller. Well, he's admitted that he's Jewish. Anyway. But obviously he's following rabbinical Judaism. This is another thing. It's important, but it gets lost. You've got your followers of the Tanakh, or Torah, Old Testament, those that stay under Mosaic law. And then you've got these Talmudists, these dipsticks, that were basically the Second Temple Babylonians who came back into Levant to take control over the followers. But then in came a guy. In came a guy called Yeshua and said, kiss my ass. Kiss my ass. He weren't against the followers of the Tanakh, the Torah Jews. He was against the temple Jews from Babylon who were taking control over everything. And that again gets lost as well. It gets lost. And people that call themselves Jewish today, they don't even look at it that deep. And it lost and stuck a bit. They don't know which way to go. And as this manipulation of the religions continues for division, it's going to get more and more difficult for sensible people within each of the religions to trust each other. It's just going to get worse. And eventually it's just going to bang. It is going to collide at one point, isn't it? What else can it do? We hope it doesn't, but I think it's a false hope. I think it's that far down the line now. It's the only thing that's going to solve this thing, unfortunately. So Mew says, "Hi Simon, my favourite number 37. 37. Where are we now? Pedram says, I've posted link in last week's live comments if you'd be interested. Yeah, I've seen it. I didn't follow it through though, unfortunately. But thanks for that, Pedram. And you shut up. Where are we? Yep, there we go. Oh, no, that shot right up. Okay. By the way, bloody absolute cleric defrauded a bank and has purchased multiple houses in London. Bad news, mobilise all protective measures. Says Pedram, yeah. Oh, we're in for some fun. Of that, there's no doubt. But they need to get our boys conscripted, you see. That's the imperative. It won't work from there because they're going to take you away and leave this place open. Lucky I never used 33, Lord. 37 was my age when I started using that name. Simon. Anthony says, are we thumbs upping? Oh yeah, gets the thumbs up, chaps. Let's have some thumbs up. I've noticed it does seem to be getting pressed a little bit more on the censorship gig, does this YouTube channel. And to be honest, I think with the topics we've covered since September conference have been so... And most people probably didn't understand it. Most people probably were interested. But make no mistake, the data that I've presented since September is fucking dynamite, okay? If you really want to understand what's going on, what's happened, why we're in this position, it's in all that data. Anyway, there you go. So get the thumbs up, folks. Mew says, Cosmic number 37, hope you have checked it out. Upward says, did John Coleman write the Committee 300? He did indeed, yes. That's exactly who he wrote. The Olympians. He wrote a few books, actually. And then he disappeared. And Alex Jones, back in the day, sort of attempted to pretend he'd got him on, which he pretty obviously wasn't John Coleman. But they were trying to play a blinder there. They did the same with an occultist, Fritz Springmeier, where Jones tried to convince everybody that he brought him back on and to undermine the importance of the data that they'd put out previously. So I've always wondered what happened to John Coleman. Hopefully he's still around. YouTube completely went off. I had to reboot just then. All good, I'm back on the room, says Mew. Really? Anthony says upward, yes he did. So that's to John Coleman. John Coleman, the Committee 300 is a good read, yes. It's Dr. John Coleman, not that spastic that's running around on all your platforms today with 25 million subscribers, because of course he's a shill. It's not that John Coleman we're talking about. All right. Maybe, in fact, I do actually have. Let's just give you, so people can get a grip of what we're talking about, because it's got nothing to do. So if you go onto my website and put Committee of 300, it probably work better if I use the right keyboard. Wait a minute. What's going on here? We'll start again. Committee 300. Hit that. So, I've got a few reports on here citing his books. Committee 300's Roundtable Network, Chatham House. That's Tavistock. Committee 300, the Olympians. International Banking Cartel, Committee 300, and the Star Group. And I think that's pretty much it. But coming under that umbrella, you've got Tavistock, World Economic Forum, MIT, NHS, Modern Warfare, it's a Bilderberg Steering Committee. You've got quite a lot of subjects that come under the Committee of 300, which is a supranational committee of the biggest psychos in every country, sat on the table. They get a seat on the table. So if you've watched John Wick, you get a better idea of what they're talking about there. So what else have we got? John Coleman, yeah, it's a good read, it is. I think I've got a download on those pages of the books, but I can't remember. It's a long time since I put them up. Paul says, interesting, Mew. Okay, Pedram says, French intelligence goons and philosophers, including Corbyn and Foucault, were instrumental in 1979 Najaf absolute cleric coup d'etat against Iran. Shah had built 75,000 mosques to enable the network. Did he know? I didn't know that. Thanks for that, Pedram. So this idea that the Shah was took out because he were wanting to keep the minerals for Iran, is that all a false flag? Makes sense because you were educated here. Paul says, interesting. Pseudo-polymath. Evening pseudo-polymath. Hi there, I'm wondering who Craig Oxley is and what happened to the Unhive Mind website. Is the Unhive Mind website gone? Has it been took down? I don't know. Craig Oxley, that name rings a bell. So I'm not sure about that. Pedram says, I just watched an hour-long Coleman lecture on the 300 on YouTube too. Yeah, good stuff. Lad I know was an extra on Peaky Blinders for a full series. Okay. Really? Okay. Where are we now? Right. Lad I know was an extra on Peaky Blinders for all the series. Cool. Jerry says, I thought Taboo showed a lot from that period, East India and all that. Taboo? Oh, I've not seen that. Is that like a gig on Netflix, like Taboo? Okay, that might be one to look at. So Mew gives you a link to the video. Anthony says, did you pick up on the reference to the Society of Oddfellows in Peaky section? So reference as section D intelligence in the show, so relation perhaps to the Society of Oddfellows in reality. Yeah, and I mean, I've done a study on them, a few studies on them actually. I'm not sure whether I've actually got them on this site, but I certainly had a lot of data on the others. Now, if you go into Bury, so you're heading to Manchester, fucking everywhere, Oddfellows. All over the buildings, the civic buildings in the centre. So the Oddfellows were definitely a Catholic group, a Catholic power, secret society, for sure. And if you see the odd fella that were in that Peaky Blinders, he wasn't a very nice chap. So, yeah, but they're all over the north of England, are the odd fellas. Anthony. Maroon Fox says, evening all and Sean, evening Maroon Fox. Welcome. John says, thumbs up, thank you, John. The Tackle Bay Tourist. Okay, howdy, Sean. Love the new look, you handsome devil. Well, thank you very much, the Tackle Bay Tourist. And welcome. Mew says, it will become soft, Sean. Stick with it. Yeah, it's just getting it. I mean, I do like it, actually. It's definitely a different look. But yeah, it's just getting that. I think I might be cutting it too short and not letting it get a bit longer so that it. Anyway, I'll get there in the end. But thanks, Mew. Paul says, thanks, Mew. I'll watch it later. They thought they could fight the statute makers with statute. Maroon Fox says, Sean, the beard keeps your head balanced, mate. Okay, thanks for that. Mew said, I don't follow them closely, but dropped in every now and then. The arguments with the black barrister were boring. Is this the black belt barrister? Oh, I've watched a couple of them. Yeah, don't be picking that up, chaps. Where are we? Franz Bouton. Wonderful. Thanks for that explanation. You're more than welcome, sir. Or madam. Maroon Fox says, Sean, have you read David Icke's latest book? No, I think the last book I read of David Icke's was the one on the, the World Trade Center. So we're going back to, way back, early 2000s. I read the Truth Will Set You Free, which to this day I still think is the best book he ever wrote. I read Biggest Secret, of course, and then I think there was a couple more, and then he did the yellow page, front page on the Twin Towers, and I didn't follow any further on that. There would have been a reason why I wasn't. I think it's the alien and it's the lizard stuff that just didn't make sense to me. So I thought, we'll leave that alone. But no, I haven't. Is it an interesting read? Where are we there? I've got lost again. Okay. So I haven't, Maroon Fox, no. What's it about, by the way? You can let us know. Because I have nothing against David Icke. I've got to be honest, apart from the fact that he's telling everybody I'm a fucking lizard because I'm rhesus negative. I'm sorry, David. You've sucked into some garbage there, matey. I've tried. How many times have I tried to shapeshift on here, chaps? I'm a failure. I can't do it. It doesn't work, and I've tried my bestest. But no, I don't like that idea that research negative to be classed as lizards. I'm sorry, I really don't buy that, because I'm not. And I think I have respect for his work, his effort, and I know what he's been through in his time. But I don't know where he's going nowadays. And he doesn't offer remedy. And that, for me, when you've been studying this stuff for so long, and I'm not far behind him in time. I mean, I started in 1993. So I've been at it a long time. You can't get that much enveloped in this and not start to see remedies in different areas. And I find people that don't promote remedies are definitely not expert in the field. They're up to something else. I don't know. What is an estate? So you might say, well, in relation to the way the system works today, you're basically claiming your mother's maiden, your ancestry through the mother. So it's everything that's been built through your ancestry on this land, because we've paid for it in taxes, etc. That you might class as your estate. But ultimately what the estate is your weight in gold. Because when you're born, they create a value to your weight in gold on the British Isles, and that then is the res in the trust that's then taken on by the Crown. So that's your estate, basically. But your estate there is built on your dominion rights, or your sovereign rights given to you by the Father of the Beginnings when you're born on his earth. So that's basically a brief description, you might say. Weefyman says, we have 12 presumptions of court, how to rebut. I have them on the website. But the thing is with this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, it's how you approach this data in your own mind. If you are looking at something and then going off to find somebody else's opinion, at least recognise that you're looking for somebody else's opinion. You've got to study the word, what you're reading, each word. What does it mean? If you don't know what a word means, define it. Then you've got a full picture of what that sentence is communicating to you. And if you focus to it like that, and believe you me, I did years and years and years of doing it the way everybody does it. And time again, when I was putting this stuff into action, I recognised that I was wrong. I didn't know it all. I was doing something wrong. And I had to start again. And I've started again a lot of times. And honestly, it really does come down to the more effort you put in on your own bat by what you're studying, referencing, defining, etymology even, of what you're reading. The more you comprehend what you're reading, even if it's like 5 words, you might think you comprehend what it's saying, but when you start to look at definitions and etymology, then you think, oh, it's not saying that, it's saying this. And the more effort you put into that, the more you'll be able to define it and know what it's saying yourself. Because the truth is, they do tell you. It is in everything. They do tell you what's what. But we don't see it. And that's down to the programming we get as children in education, which programs the subconscious. So you can read a paragraph and you will edit that paragraph based on what we put in your mind, specifically from 1 to 7, but right through your education system. And so if you don't unplug that edit, that program that's been put into your subconscious by reprogramming your subconscious to the correct version of things, it's a struggle. You will always read something but edit it to fit in with what you've had programmed. And a fine example of that is, if I said to you, Adam and Eve, everybody thinks apple. It's just a picture that comes to your mind, and nowhere in any biblical text does the apple show reference in the story of Adam and Eve. It just doesn't. It says fruit. So that's a prime example of what I'm saying when I say there's the program that's been put into your subconscious, which has programmed it, and then when you read something, that edit or program is what comes into your mind, even though it's not saying it. Yeah, that's the difference between the subconscious and the conscious mechanic. So give that some thought, because that is the problem. And it's in everything. So this is why you can study the Bible, let's say, for your entire life. And if you haven't dealt with that program that was put in there, every time you read that Bible, you're missing the guts of it because you're editing what you're reading to fit in with that story or narrative that religion has given you. You see, there's doctrine, which is the cause and foundation, and then you've got interpretation. And what religions are just bodies of men who have interpreted doctrine to serve them. To give them power off you. So they'll create a script that you get fed. They're above that as an inner circle and see it in a different way, which always gives them power over you. And this is what religion is. It's only an interpretation. And of course, religion is based on belief, just on that mechanic that we've just discussed. They know you're going to edit to what it is they've programmed, that they can tell you all day what reality is, but you're not going to see what they're saying. You're going to follow the program. And this is why they know they've got full control. Inner circle, outer circle. And it's the same in everything. It's the same in law. Every act, statute has remedy. It might have 3 remedies at different levels. Your average solicitor will get the low level remedy. Your next level solicitor will get the next level. The barristers, the KCs will get the top white loopholes and remedies, which is why they can come in and everybody just thinks they're amazing and fantastic, because they've just completely annihilated the entire act, because they have the loophole. This is the way the system and this world works. So if you don't move to educate yourself, then, which means reprogramming the subconscious, then all you're doing is copying. That's whether you're at school, you're copying, whether you go to, you go to college, you're copying. You are a bona fide copier, and then you can paste it and recite the copy and produce another bunch of copiers. Yeah? And obviously this is why at school where I weren't interested, because most of the time it was garbage anyway. I only listened to what I thought were valid, real and interesting. The rest I weren't interested in. I was too busy showing off in front of all them girlies. So it worked well for me. Anyway, that aside, what is an estate? 12 presumptions. Mew says, we inherited the earth and everything on it, 8 billionth of a share of it, your estate, in my humble opinion. Okay. Anthony says, Trump is symbolically linked with a lot of Jupiterian symbology. So quoting Confucius, when man comprehends symbol, a great veil will fall from the eyes. I could go on. Expansion, desire, conquer, etc. Absolutely, Anthony. You're absolutely right. That's how they communicate. And it's another way in which they're telling you what they want, but you don't understand it. They've given you what a triangle is, what a square is, without giving you the esotericism of the numerology, the colour codes, etc. Where are we now? China just refused to allow a shitload of silver yeah, I believe. Yeah, they blocked it. Oh, well, I don't know. Right, well, I know that they're blocking people from having silver if you've not got a contract with the government. So, that's interesting. You see, America does have a massive payment to pay out this month. They only just scabbed it in December. And I did say in December that they've got away with their watch Venezuela. And, of course, here we go. They've got Venezuela. They'll probably have enough silver now to make the next payment, while also installing this Noahide puppet. Where are we now? Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, estimated at approximately 303 billion barrels. Okay. Anthony says, so securing the title reunites the concept of the two, away from the presumption of any outside undue influence, perhaps. Well, they've got administration right, by definition. You have to, and it's a presumption. You have to rebut that presumption. So this is where you get the idea of reversion. But it's not quite as simple as that. There's 3 jurisdictions. Sovereign, estate, ens legis. Each has a different language. And if you're coming from the sovereign and misuse your language, it reverts to the lowest denominator. So you'll have noticed that I've stopped doing law for quite some time on the live streams. It's not because I don't want to teach and give. It's because I've recognised that even though what we speak of has value, even though everything we say is real, that you will, and especially now, where I've been able to help people in the past on certain things, they are just getting railroaded now. Something's changed here in the UK in relation to how these shits are just railroading you. For me, it comes down to the fact that foundation document isn't there on reversion. Now, I've put together a sovereign will from the mother to give back the titles to their offspring, and that's what I've been working on of late. Every burgeoning question I had on law that I've had for years, I put into AI over a couple of months period when it was still working fine. The data is there. I just need to go through it now and sort it out. But I'm quite happy that what I need I've got, or at least I've got the background for it, so that I might just have to pursue parts of it a little bit more. But I'm very content in the sense that the data, any questions I've had all these years that were missing, I couldn't find the answers to. The AI did point me in the right direction. And reversion is the game. So I'm a bit less inclined now to help it or promote the idea that people should try and fight against this system, because if they make one mistake, it becomes even more costly, and you're also risking prison. So you've got to be extra careful, and so that's the reason why I don't do as much law now on these live streams. It's not because I don't want to. It's just because until I get it right, I don't want to send people down false paths, because I know a lot of you out there have got balls and you'll have a go. And if you trust somebody that's telling you this stuff, you'll have a go. Well, I have to say now, things have changed. They've got this fraud, error and recovery bill in. They're using it even though it's still a bill. We pulled them on it last year in the council tax gig that we're on, and we sorted it out. It were back within 3 days because we'd caught them out. They were using this fraud, error and recovery bill as a bill, not law. So we know that they're doing that because they're trying to speed everything up now. They're teaching everybody no hide. They're pulling in this no hide trust law, so that they're now dealing with every legal title person, ens legis, under rabbinical Judaic law, which basically means as a non-Jew, as a goy, you have no rights, you can't be heard, nothing's going to work for you. So fingers crossed we get it together, and I have to say we're going to get it together. There's no doubt about it. Mew says, taking ownership of your estate, removal from the state, benefiting from your estate is how I comprehend. Absolutely. That is exactly what's the crack. But let Sean give us his opinion, Neil. No worries. Watch yesterday's Alex Jones Infowars on Israel lobby pushing for first. I've seen it. Upward says, me too. Not Alex Jones, but I've seen the fact that they're trying to move for it. So, China just, I classify my estate initially as the mind and body that contains my life force, energy, the game. That's your flesh and blood, your biology, your memory, terrain, and breath. So, mind and body, you're talking about sovereign, right? That's your private trust, your body, your biology, which you as a soul you're in. It's an avatar. It's just an avatar that is required to live down here. So that's your sovereign. The estate is what's formed in common law on the land, and the crown is involved. So that's your next jurisdiction. And then, of course, you have the UK corporation, which deals entirely in the ens legis, or the fictional title subject to legislation. And legislation only, which is why they can't see beyond it. So you come in as a man, they can't see that. They can't see it. You need to come in as a witness, because then you'll be heard, because you're not a defendant. You're in a witness box. Now, that's another important. So now I use witness and scribe for the ens legis, because you will be heard as a witness. and you are acting as a scribe for it when you sign stuff off. So keep that in mind as well. Witness, you need to be in the witness box. You'll come forward, special appearance, court of record, as a witness, so you need to be in the witness box. The defendant, you could put your birth certificate in the dock if you like, because that's the defendant. That's the liable entity. That is the fictional entity that's liable for the debt incurred by this corporate system. If that makes sense to you. So I'm saying we're not doing much law, we're doing quite a bit, aren't we? You might want to re-listen to this, because as I'm thinking now, I've given you quite a lot of stuff here now. A lot of stuff. Which, of course, as I said, we're going to do another conference. I have to just sort out a few things, and then we'll do a second Zoom for those that attended the conference. If you want to be included in these Zooms, ladies and gentlemen, you would need to come to the next conference. So keep your eyes out for when we do the next one, and then you'll be included. And we're going to go into detail with this properly, because I want to teach people, because it's no good just thinking you know it. You have to know it. But more importantly, there's another gentleman involved in this, Darren, who, if you attended the conference, you know what I'm talking about, because he's going to teach you how to use the trusts. So it's not an easy game. You're going to have to put a lot of attention into it, and you're going to have to spend some coin. It's as simple as that, okay? But if you're real and you want to do it, then I don't think that's going to be a problem. Where are we? Paul says, Venezuela has, done that. So securing the title reunites the concept of the two away from the presumption of any outside undue influence, perhaps. Where am I? That's jumped up again. Hi, John, Jerry, and all, says Treen. Pedram says, Shah, crippled by World War II invasion of Iran, Churchill took all food depots, 9 million perished to engineered famine and perhaps other means. Shah was controlled until he became a one-party dictator. Okay. Pedram, I saw that too, all over YT. You know, things are going to kick off when Saturn Yar visits Trump. Iran, they just went Iran, so it wasn't a surprise to me about Venezuela either, no. David Icke is still current. Well worth a read. He still talks a lot about what you talk about. Well, I have to go. I mean, I have a major respect for David Icke for what he did, because I know what he went through, because I went through the same. And I know exactly. But obviously, you know, people just go on. We're all on different paths, and we're all bringing the parts of the picture to create the picture, as it were. But I do take... I'm a bit upset about him telling everybody I'm a lizard, because I'm not a fucking lizard. You know what I'm saying? Something's amiss there. And I think it's down to some of these channeled entities and programmed entities that he's interviewed. But I don't take out away from him from that. So he's still current. Great. Well, that's good. He's doing his thing, because this is what it's about. We each do our thing. And we're pulling in what needs to be pulled in, because it's up to you guys out there what you make of it. You know, we can't force you to take this stuff on. And of course, people understand folks like me, and you might say David, based on their own intelligence and their own frequency. You know, it's like that. So thanks for that, Maroon. Tried to please Bolsheviks as well as Abraham, Empire of Babylon, the Jaff clerics, who were an invention of East India Company. Shaw tried too late to copy Stalin. He failed miserably. Okay. Thanks for that, Pedram. Erica Kirk's a Rothschild mother's side, her name Rothstein, related to Rothschild. Well, I still don't think that Charlie's dead. Pedram says, as in Venezuela, USA might put Pentagon in charge of running Iran. They have Bajan Kian of Jen, Mike Flynn team poised, and two other Pentagon men push for a republic, it seems, USA 51 state. But you've also got to remember they want to get this war going, bud. And I think you in Iran are the key to that, which will bring in China and Russia, and all hell is going to break loose. Check out Jason Reza Georgiani's Substack. This week, he laid the Iranian-American philosopher, geopoliticians' grounds for Iran joining USA as a satellite state. Indeed, okay. Philosopher, okay. Isn't oil and gas not yet another money? I have heard Earth's inner chemistry and physical is never... It is. At the end of the 1800s, they were having a big geological meeting in Geneva where they were going to reframe a lot of geology and reclassify everything, new tables. and the Rothschilds funded enough people to make the claim that oil and coal were fossil fuels. Oil is self-replenishing. You empty a well, leave it for a couple of years, it will be as full as it was when you left it. And coal or dried up oil seams. So coal is just dried up oil. It's not a fossil fuel. And the dinosaur game, again, in its time, backed that up, but now they're using it against the kids for the no-hide as a new creation story. So it all works. There's nothing wasted with these people. Like the architect said in The Matrix, they've been doing it for a long time and they're very good at it. David actually suggests mass non-compliance. Well, that's a good. You're never going to get it though. People are dependent on it. Tested the bug script Orc 2020. I'm afraid collectively failed. Hence they're all full steam ahead with their plans. Yeah, people won't stick together. Great sense, Sean. Said Anthony, always classified myself as one who can see when shown correctly. Yep. Anthony, hello. Weaverman says the Venezuela crisis could be the Black Swan event as the catalyst to launch the stagnant crypto market rocketing. It's moving fast. Also on the full moon. Well, it's been a very strange full moon, this moon for me. Very revealing in certain quarters. Now, if I don't get on with this, I'm not going to do it. So this is Hitler and Churchill kissing cousins. And it basically... Right. Where are we? For most of my life, I accepted the official explanation of the Second World War without question. Hitler was presented as the embodiment of evil, while Churchill and the Allies were portrayed as heroic defenders of freedom. I believe the accounts of atrocities, the narratives of good versus evil, and the story that Hitler committed suicide to escape justice. However, that certainty began to weaken when I started looking more closely at the details. I listened to Hitler's speeches correctly, translated in full, then compared what was said publicly with how the events actually unfolded. At the same time, my view of Churchill shifted dramatically, and rather than the heroic figure I had been taught, I come to see him as arrogant, unpleasant, and driven by empire rather than morality. A great deal of his personal behaviour was quietly ignored or excused. In fact, he spent the majority of his time in office drunk and high on opioids. As my research continued, I began to question whether Hitler and Churchill were even the enemies history claimed they were. Tracing family connections and financial links led me to conclude that they were connected by blood and power, along with the British monarchy. Through the very same family, the Rothschilds. From that point on, the war no longer looked like nations fighting each other, but like a controlled conflict between ruling families, staged for the public. It absolutely was the Second World War. In the same vein as the moon landings and all this, all fake. This is also where my research into Hitler's survival began. In 2019, I came across an FBI document stating that Hitler didn't die. In 1945, he escaped to Argentina, where he lived the rest of his life in hiding. According to this document, he and Eva Braun travelled with the daughter Anne under Operation Paperclip, and that was not only known by the Allies, but planned by them too. In Argentina, Hitler and Eva had 3 more daughters who later emerged as major political figures in Europe: Angela Merkel, Theresa May, and Dalia Gribauskaite. These children were intentionally groomed, educated in England and Germany, then prepared to take positions of power. This would form part of what would later be described as the Fourth Reich, not through tanks and armies, but through politics and institutions. Eva later changed her identity to Madeleine Le Pen after Hitler died in a car accident in 1957. She moved to the United States, remarried, became Madeline Dunham, and their daughter became Stanley Ann Dunham. At just 19 years old, Stanley became pregnant by a Kenyan national named Barack Obama, and they had a son named Barry. When she discovered that Barack was still married to his previous wife, she already had a family. She returned to the United States with a child. She later married Lolo Sotero, and Barry's name was changed to Barack Obama. Hitler didn't lose influence after the war ended. His descendants were positioned into roles of power decades later, long after the public believed the story was finished. Moreover, the further I looked into Obama, Merkel and May, the more I concluded that their leadership didn't benefit ordinary people, but served the same entrenched systems of power. You see, Russia was always the real target, specifically because it was the capital of Tartaria. See, I don't buy that. And the effort to destroy it didn't begin in the 20th century, but stretches back to the Napoleonic Wars. Both World Wars were simply a later and more destructive phase of the same campaign. So he's obviously fallen into this Tartaria guy, blag. But he is right in that It was about destroying the architecture across Europe, specifically in Germany, and especially Dresden. So I'm not going to read any more of that because he's gone into the Russian side of things. But yeah, I've studied that stuff in relation to Eva Braun, Theresa May, Merkel, Barack Obama. Okay? And of course, this Lolo Soetoro was a mass murderer in the Indonesian coups. So now, John of Gaunt. There you look at this guy. He's as dark as they come. As dark as they come. Dark figure indeed. All right. John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, 6th of March 1340 to the 3rd of February 1399, was an English prince, military leader and statesman. He was the fourth son, third surviving, of King Edward III, and the father of King Henry IV. Because of Gaunt's royal origin, advantageous marriages, and some generous land grants, he was one of the richest men in his era, and an influential figure during the reigns of both his father and his nephew Richard II. As Duke of Lancaster, he is the founder of the Royal House of Lancaster, whose members would ascend the throne after his death. His birthplace, Ghent in Flanders, then known in English as Gaunt, was the origin of his name. John's early career was spent in France and Spain fighting in the 100 Years' War. He made an abortive attempt to enforce a claim to the crown of Castile that came through his second wife, Constance of Castile, and for a time styled himself as King of Castile. When Edward the Black Prince, Gaunt's elder brother and heir apparent to the aging Edward III, became incapacitated owing to poor health, Gaunt assumed control of many government functions and rose to become one of the most powerful political figures in England. Now, there you've got Edward III and the Black Prince, okay? The Black Prince is clearly ginger, and Edward III is clearly greying. Okay, but there's other pictures of Edward the Third looking exceptionally ginger as well. So that's basically, as you'd expect the family of Plantagenets to be looking. They're all gingers. If you go back further, they're all gingers. Okay, it's a fact. The Plantagenets were white ginger. Okay. King Edward III of England, 1312-1377, grants the gift of Aquitaine and Gascony to his son Edward the Black Prince, okay? So there he is. On the 19th of July, 1362, historiated initial E, illuminated manuscript painting of 1390. So that's a manuscript in 1390. They're going to know. They're not going to depict him as ginger in 1390, are they? In the same century. They're going to paint it as he was. Agreed? He was faced with military difficulties abroad and political divisions at home, and disagreements as how to deal with these crises led to tensions between Gaunt, the English Parliament, and the ruling class, making him an unpopular figure for a time. So this is John of Gaunt. He helped forge the 1386 Anglo-Portuguese alliance secured through the marriage of his daughter Philippa to John I of Portugal, which endured for centuries. Now, there you can see a sign that he was tied to the Templars. Okay. So there you can see a sign now that instead of the Plantagenets, we're seeing a man who was tied to the Portuguese Templars. Okay. Now, it's still to be known whether they were Solomon Templars or Christian Templars in Portugal. John exercised great influence over the English throne during the minority of King Richard II, Edward the Black Prince's son, and the ensuing periods of political strife. He mediated between the king and a group of rebellious nobles, which included Gaunt's own son and heir apparent Henry Bolingbroke. Following Gaunt's death in 1399, the Lancastrian estates and titles were declared forfeit to the crown, and the now disinherited son Bolingbroke was branded a traitor and ordered into exile. So this is where they stole the Duchy of Lancaster, okay, following the John of Gaunt's death. Now, my guess is that were arranged by John of Gaunt, because, of course, he was in league with the Portuguese Templars, as opposed to continuing the efforts of Edward I, Edward II, and Edward III. Okay, so that you can see here, this is where it's starting to shift. Now, another point to be made, he was also there at a time when this new regime that it were being shoved in, or Parliament, was moving away from the Magna Carta. So you can see that the intrusion of this Parliament idea was coming in actually from the inner city of London, who were merchants. Okay? And it was to subvert the Magna Carta, or the common law of England. Okay? Henry did not stay in exile. He raised an army to reclaim his inheritance and depose Richard. He reigned as King Henry IV from 1399 to 1413, the first of the descendants of John of Gaunt to hold the English throne. So whatever were going on there, they've now got a man in tied to the Portuguese Templars, okay? And in support of this new parliament. John cultivated an extensive network of retainers known as the Lancastrian Affinity, which became the cornerstone of his political power, and he was later inherited by his eldest surviving son, Henry, the future King Henry IV. All English monarchs from Henry IV onwards are descended from John of Gaunt. His direct male line, the House of Lancaster, ruled England from 1399 until the Wars of the Roses. Gaunt fathered additional children surnamed Beaufort, from the name of one of Lancaster's fiefs in France, by Catherine Swynford, his long-term mistress. After he married Swynford, his third marriage, his Beaufort children were later legitimised by royal and papal decrees through his daughter Joan Beaufort, Countess of Westmoreland. He was an ancestor of the Yorkist kings Edward IV and Edward V, and Richard III, through his great-granddaughter Lady Margaret Beaufort. He was also an ancestor of Henry VII, who married Edward IV's daughter Elizabeth of York, and all subsequent monarchs are descendants of their marriage. Two of John's daughters married into the continental royal houses, those of Portugal and Castile. Okay, so this is where you can start to see these Templars are starting to get in. Because remember, Edward I fought against the Templars. Through them, many royal families of Europe can trace lineage to him. But it's the Solomon Templars that they were fighting. And we've gone through all that in the live streams. So this is Edward III, okay? The daddy, as it were. And again, there is the Black Prince. Sorry, Edward III. Again, my apologies. Now, this is the family line of descent to John of Gaunt. So you have Henry III, Edward I. Now, it's Edward I's line where it comes from Isabella of France, King Edward II, Edward III. And then you've got Edward the Black Prince, Richard II, and John of Gaunt. Okay, so he's on another line. He's not coming direct from Isabella of France, blah, blah. It's a shift over. Okay, and then, of course, everything goes tits up. Yeah, and of course, the key to it is he's a completely different. He looks different. He's darker. It's more Arabic, or it could even be Moorish, Arabic Moor. Yeah, and this, of course, is Richard III, who were deposed, the last of the Plantagenets, and of course, you then get Henry Tudor, Henry VII. Again, he's a ginger guy. Okay. Richard of Gloucester, 1450-80, became the last of the Plantagenet kings after a distinguished period of loyal service to his brother, King Edward IV, as High Constable of England, Warden of the West Marches, and, in effect, the Governor of the North as the king's loyal lieutenant. Far from being the cripple portrayed by Shakespeare, he was a strong horseman, a soldier capable of leading his troops into the field of battle. His deformity was only noted after his death. A reforming monarch, he was also the first English monarch to take the coronation oath in English. Okay? He also oversaw one of the most forward-looking parliaments of the 15th century, taking measures to end corruption, ordering legal trials to be in English, and juries to have sound finances. He also had an impressive record of support for the north of England, for Yorkshire in particular, where he spent his teenage years at Midlam Castle in Wensleydale. He also did a great deal of important work in Yorkshire, supporting trade, bringing about important legal reforms, removing taxes on books and printing. He financed the strengthening of harbour walls and defences at Scarborough, helped by Holy Trinity Church in Skipton, and was a great supporter of York Minster. In 1484, he also set up the Council of the North, initially at Sheriff Hutton Castle, in order to improve access to conciliar justice in the north of England. But not all Richard's reforming work and removal of corruption, as well as support for the north, went down well with rich and powerful southern barons, who were keen to remove his northern inclined Yorkshire monarch and therefore to support Henry Tudor's insurrection. So there's always been a massive divide between the north and the south. The south is where these Europeans were coming in, as well as up in Scotland. So the north of England were being sort of squeezed from the south and from Scotland by these Solomon Templars. Which is important. Oh, right. Sorry, mate. You should have said it a bit earlier. Oh, shit. Sorry, chaps. That's me not checking. Okay. So that you can see the divide between the north and the south. There were also difficulties of issue of the disappearance of presumed death of Richard's nephews, the Child King Edward V and his brother Richard of York, living in the Tower of London, even though there was some argument as to the legitimacy of Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville, which led to the parliamentary declaration, or titulus regius, in favour of Richard as legal king. The disappearance of the uncrowned Edward V was convenient for Richard. However, the historian Langley, who was a key researcher in the discovery in 2012 of Richard's humiliated body, lost under the concrete of a Leicester car park, has spent 20 years researching the murky depths of this complex period of English history. This was made more difficult by the deliberate obliterating of monastic records, annals, and archives by the ruthless Henry Tudor, in order to wipe out contemporary accounts of actual events. Fortunately, Henry's reach did not extend to the European mainland, including Flanders. So another big part of destroying the monasteries was to remove the history, of England. Thanks to the work of a team of up to 300 archivists and historians, many of them in Netherlands and Belgium, where archives remained undisturbed, a very different picture has emerged for analysis. Overwhelming documentary evidence, including archives and personal witness statements from manuscripts of proven age and authenticity, has established that the two princes were almost certainly not murdered in the Tower by Richard, but smuggled perhaps for their own safety out of the country. After Richard III's defeat at Bosworth in 1485, various attempts were made for the young princes to return to claim the English throne from the usurper Henry VII. There is even evidence that Edward V was given a coronation in Dublin Cathedral before an abortive attempted invasion of England in 1487. However, he was deliberately given the name of Lambert Simnel by the Tudors to reduce the significance of the rebellion. A second attempt, this time in 1497, to install his younger brother Richard of York as Richard IV was defeated at Stokefield in Nottinghamshire. Again, a false name, Perkin Warbeck, diminished the nature of the threat to Henry. Unlike most historians, including many academics who have been quick to dismiss her work as being amateurish or not belonging to the one of the long-established universities, Langley has worked in partnership with forensic scientists, police and legal experts in the process of evidence-based cross-checks deduction to build up a compelling case of how there was a deliberate falsification of facts to discredit Richard, actually one of our most enlightened monarchs. This was required in order to boost the legitimacy of the Tudor line. Remember, the Tudors were put in through the House Stanley on behalf of the House Pallavicini of the Holy See or Venetian banking families. Okay? So, see this game, see bankers, families, Venetians, Pallavicini, Farnese, Medici, etc., Orsini, this bunch, okay, that herald from Iran. No offense, Pedram. So, as I was saying, a process of evidence-based cross-check deduction to build up a compelling case of how there was a deliberate falsification of facts to discredit Richard. This was required in order to boost the legitimacy of the Tudor line, always under threat, even during much of Elizabeth's reign, because of course she again were Pallavicini, robbing the galleons coming out of South America to build up the navy, especially from her cousin Mary Stuart. So we get a completely false idea through his story, the Victor's story. Elizabeth was, however, fortunate in having an extraordinary propagandist on her side, the world's greatest playwright, William Shakespeare, who also, according to Darren, gave us an extra 3,000 new words in the English language. Naturally, in order to continue to have royal patronage, indeed to have a career at all, Shakespeare had to follow the party line. He also used the sources available to him, such as Holinshead's Chronicles, his portrayal of the defeated monarch in Richard III, is a masterly piece of dramatic art, a brilliant and compelling exploration of villainy. But it has little to do with actual historical fact. Yet this portrayal has entered our national psyche and has helped reinforce a particular piece of national mythology, which not even the forensic skills of Langley can entirely undo. But it is also another sorry example of how an inspirational great northern leader, creator of the Council of the North and bringer of the English language to our legal system, was marginalised and even destroyed by a Westminster-based hegemony. Victors continued to distort and change the history to suit their needs. Richard II's parliamentary ideas were rooted in a belief in absolute monarchy and the divine right of kings, which sought to make his will trump the force of law and place the king above parliament. This stance brought him into direct conflict with a parliament that increasingly asserted its authority to restrain the monarch, particularly through a control of taxation and governmental oversight. Now remember, this parliament was operated by the inner city merchants. Key aspects of Richard II's relationship with Parliament and his ideas about royal power include belief in prerogative. Richard strongly believed in the extensive powers of the royal prerogative, viewing himself as the source of all law, which he was when you're talking about people. Now, they talk about divine right. It weren't so much divine right. What it basically was is a sovereign taking in trust the sovereignty of the people. So the monarch was only sovereign by right of the sovereignty of the people, whose estates were put into the office of monarch to protect them from external forces and also internal forces, which is why Edward I had to expel the moneylenders, because they were starting to get property. That's not allowed. If you were protecting the people's estates, you can't have foreigners coming in and starting to take it over. So it wasn't a racist thing. It was a duty of the monarch protecting the sovereignty of the people of England. Excuse me. This stands pointing to a direct conflict with Parliament that increasingly asserts its authority to restrain the monarch, particularly through control of taxation and governmental oversight. Key aspects of Richard II's relationship with Parliament and his ideas about royal power include... Oh, we've done that. Prerogative, viewing himself as the source of all law. Well, of course, because the law was put in the office of monarch. An idea drawn from Roman law concepts, but contrary to the English tradition of kings being under the law, which is what the Magna Carta did. So, okay, that's what they've written, but not necessarily correct, I don't think. Attempts to undermine Parliament's power. In the later years of his reign, after 1397, Richard attempted to rule as an autocrat. He had the Parliament of Shrewsbury in 1398 declared all previous restraints on the king void and delegate all parliamentary power to a committee of his friends, effectively bypassing the need to call Parliament. You see, now they make it look like it's all about taking back power off the people, when in reality, post Magna Carta, it was about removing Parliament's ability to allow the merchants to take power through Parliament on the land, and thus where they were starting to take and dip into the people's estates. Look at it today. They've got absolute right to our estates and they're double dipping. Because not only are they taking it when you sign on that dotted line, they're actually making you pay it as well. And then if you fail, they're taking the actual property. And so it's been a stepping stone to this all the way through. Conflicts over finance and council, Parliament and the nobility frequently use the power to grant taxes, control of the purse strings, as leverage to demand reforms and the dismissal of king's favourites. And this is what we've been taught for a long time, but it is not the truth of it. Such as Robert de Vere and Michael de la Pole, and the appointment of councillors they approved of. Richard resented this deeply, believing it was his God-given right to choose his own ministers. Okay. Now, it was people's given right after Magna Carta. And this is how they've played it cleverly. They're very clever. The merciless Parliament, early in his reign, Richard was effectively taken captive by a group of nobles known as the Lords Appellant, who used the merciless Parliament of 1388 as a court to destroy the king's friends and legitimise their rebellion. This event was a major humiliation for Richard and a key driver in his later quest for absolute power and revenge. Well, is it for absolute power or just removing the power that Parliament kept claiming for the merchants? And we can look at this a little bit different now because we can actually see the end result of how Parliament is being used to enslave us on behalf of the banking people, the merchants, the merchant class. So we can start to see now, it sort of unravels the mystery around the language that we've all been force-fed as historical fact. Forced loans and abusive power. Rich's later tyranny involved imposing forced loans on communities and using royal pardons as a political bargaining tool to pressure opponents. Actions that were deeply unpopular and violated established norms. Well, pardons have always been a part of the game, and obviously if Parliament's mercilessly removing his followers, because that's what a lot of this were about, to diminish his power, then all he were doing, we're trying to reclaim that. But the way it's presented in the language that we've been taught to accept, it takes it away from what it is that Parliament... It's Parliament that was the problem. And we can see that today. Deposition and legacy. Richard's autocratic actions, particularly the seizure of Henry Bolingbroke's inheritance, led directly to his downfall in 1399. His deposition was solidified the principle that English kingship was limited and under the law, not above it. A critical step in the evolution of the UK Parliament and constitutional monarchy. UK Parliament. Well, look at the state of it. It's an absolute fucking joke. Now, if we go back to Edward II, during the reign of Edward II, 1307 to 1320, so this is after Edward I, was a feudal monarchy. But the government experienced intense power struggles and significant shifts in control. There wasn't a single new government in the modern sense, but rather a series of changing regimes as different factions of powerful barons and eventually the Queen and her lover vied for and seized control from the king. Okay? So here's where the problems really began during the reign of Edward II. And we've got a foreign queen in here. Now, if you watch Braveheart, you're getting a completely upside down view. So, for, this idea that, what's he called, that actor, Mel Gibson, is some kind of, the guy's an absolute arsewipe. He's a puppet of the supreme level for this system. Shifting centres of power. Royal authority. Edward II inherited a strong monarchy from his father, Edward I. But his reliance on controversial favourites like Piers Gaveston and later Hugh Despenser the Younger alienated the established nobility. This led to a continuous struggle to limit the king's authority. You're not going to limit the king's authority just based on the fact he has two friends. So that's nonsense. Yeah, this is about diminishing the power or the sovereignty of the king, who's only sovereign because he's holding the sovereignty of the people. And then that office is governed by the laws of Magna Carta. And they always try and shift it like he wants to be above the law. That's not the position that the monarchy held in these times. But this is how they've masked it. Baronial control, the ordainers. Facing baronial opposition, the king was forced to accept a council of 21 elected Lord Ordainers in 1310 to oversee administrative reforms. In 1311, they issued the ordinances, which significantly restricted the king's power, requiring parliamentary consent for war, grants of land and appointments, and demanding the exile of Gaveston. Now, Edward I was very well known for making sure that land was apportioned to its correct lineage. That's a big part of the reforms that Edward I did when it came to legal. He made sure there were no false claims to land, that all land was appointed and apportioned back to its original, you might say, gainers of it in the 1066 invasion. So to make a claim here that it's changed all of a sudden because of his son doesn't make sense. It means that Parliament wanted control over that because it was the lords and the barons that Edward I was forcing to use the chancery at common law to create records of where land was. So obviously, because it were the barons that were doing this country, obviously you can see that that's actually what power they wanted back. To undo what Edward I had actually tried to do. To make record of land, who owned it, any false claims, etc., were then rebutted. So again, that doesn't make sense, you know? Lancastrian ascendancy. After Edward's military defeat at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, his cousin Thomas Earl of Lancaster became the most powerful man in the realm and effectively ruled England for a few years, though his administration was weak and led to anarchy in some areas. Dispenser regime. Edward eventually fought back, defeated Lancaster in a civil war in 1322 and ruled with the Dispensers, father and son, as his new highly unpopular favourites. See, they use these favourites. It just takes you off the fact that he had people around him that were powerful and got things done, which was going against this installation of the Parliament. Queen Isabella and Roger Mortimer's coup, the final new government, this is all about putting in Parliament, arose in 1326 when Edward's estranged wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, the exiled Roger Mortimer, invaded England. Edward's support collapsed and they captured and executed the Dispensers. A parliament was summoned in 1327 where Edward was forced to abdicate in favour of his 14-year-old son. No parliament can force an abdication. It doesn't have the power. Nothing has the power over the office of monarch. Otherwise, it would be pointless having the office of monarch. So it's all smoke and mirrors, and it's all about the way they present it in the words. And back to what I was saying before about that program that you've had installed in you. If you don't reform that program by editing it correct, you read this stuff, but you don't see beyond the spin. You're reading it as you've been trained to read it. And the same applies when you're studying law. You're doing the same. It applies when you're studying religious doctrine or just doctrine that religion's based on. You're not reading it correctly. You think you are, but it's an edit, if you get my drift, yeah? It's so important that we get this, because that is what they call enlightening yourself, awakening. You're removing that programming that's binding the subconscious, because that's what controls everything. That controls your reactions to stimuli, controls your reactions to events in your life. You have to reprogram yourself. And of course, a big part of that program is to install fear in you, so that fear kicks in pretty quick, you stop. You don't move forward. And those are the people that they're afraid of, that don't know fear. Or, that's incorrect, that are happy to go with the fear, but push forward. Because there's nothing to fear, save fear itself. So when you start to understand that fear is just a frequency used by the antagonist to stop you, then why wouldn't you go for what it is you most fear? You hit it head on, because that's where the prize is that you're looking for. You know, and that's what I was learning in the 90s. And most of it were based around my own death, my own demise, you know, because that's the kind of lifestyle I was in back then. And trust me, I'm telling you what I know to be true because I've experienced it. Queen Isabel and Roger Mortimer, I've done that. So he was forced to abdicate in favour of his 14-year-old son, Edward III. What utter nonsense. Isabella and Mortimer then ruled as regents, the de facto government, until Edward III's overthrew Mortimer in 1330 and began his personal reign. And Edward III, of course, is the guy who dismantled the Florentine financial empire, the Lombardy, by saying, no, I'm not paying you back. He also created all the chivalric orders, etc. He was a very interesting king, Edward III. Now, the emerging role of Parliament, Edward II's reign inadvertently contributed to the evolution of the English Parliament. Or, this is where it started to gain power. And remember, from the inner city of London, the merchant class. So this is the merchant class taking over the wealth in land, in property, and eventually today your estates, from the people. And because, of course, the sovereign held those rights in the office, they had to attack the sovereign. It's that simple. Now, Parliament grew in power as a forum for the community of the realm. Did it? No, it was the merchant class in each area that made it up, making rules for their benefit, not the benefit of the people, but for those that were involved in their business. To express grievances and force royal concessions in return for grants of money and political support. The events of his reign, particularly in 1327 deposition, set important precedents for future limitations on monarchical authority, including the custom of separate sittings for the Lords and Commons. Well, there were no Commons. They were just the Lords. And again, you've got to remember, this is after Magna Carta. So what this is really doing is trying to destroy the Magna Carta. Because there was the law that the office of monarch was subject to while holding in trust our estates. You get me? Those opposed to the new government began to make plans to free Edward and restore him to the throne, and Roger Mortimer decided to move him to the more secure location of Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, where Edward arrived around April the 5th, 1327. It's unclear how well cared for Edward was. The records show luxury goods being brought in on his behalf, but some chroniclers suggest that he was often mistreated. Concerns continued to be raised over fresh plots to liberate Edward, some involving the Dominican order and former household knights. And one such attempt got at least as far as breaking into the prison within the castle. Now, the Dominicans were the last order to take on the Carolingian idea. So that's the reversal of the Benedictine doctrine. And they became the worst because they became the group that operated the Inquisition under Talmudic law. But until that point, here you can see that the Catholic massive in the north, which it was on the side of Edward, on the side of the monarch being power, and against Parliament, because it were merchant class. And these are things that we need to remember and take on board, because most of Western Rome was Roman. There was no Protestantism back then. There was Roman Catholicism or Roman Church, because it wasn't really Catholicism all the time, versus the merchant class, who we know to be Solomon's, Second Temple geezers. As a result of these threats, Edward was moved around to other locations in secret for a period before returning to permanent custody at the castle in the late summer of 1327. On September the 23rd, King Edward III was informed that his father had died at Berkeley Castle during the night of September the 21st. Most historians agree that Edward II did die at Berkeley on that date, although there is a minority view that he died much later. His death was, as Mark Ormrod states, suspiciously timely, as it simplified Mortimer's political problems considerably. And most historians believe that Edward probably was murdered on the orders of the new regime, although it is impossible to be certain. And that new regime is the parliamentary regimes. Now, I do have two other documents, but of course we're late, so I'm not going to go through them. I'll save them for maybe next week. Right, chaps. I think that were a good gig tonight. I quite have enjoyed that. We got some good data out. You may have to go over some of that law again, especially if you are attending these Zooms that I'll get together as soon as I can, so bear with me. And then we'll get another conference going probably in March. And we'll just keep moving forward on that basis. So you've got a lot of people going on. There's a lot of chit-chat. Okay. I'll just quickly read through it. So Sean, 33 years, an interesting number. I know. 33 years, yeah. And it's come to a fruition for me, you know. it is definitely a big change happening for me at the moment, where the things that used to get me excited, I really have no time for anymore. That doesn't mean to say it won't change again if they get too silly. I mean, I know they're trying to quash down on social media. I think just out of spite, if they did that, I'd have to go back to being how I used to be, and I'd cause more havoc. Because you get involved with everybody when I do it the old way, because I'm putting it on cars, windscreen, everywhere, throwing it in big chunks everywhere, so it's flipping around fucking streets. There's just better ways if you really want to inform the masses than social media. So the day that they do that, just to spite them, I'll probably go back and do a lot of stuff like that. But the impetus for it now has gone. It is more about now serving this reversion kind of thing, which I'm quite happy with, to be honest. I've done it for a long time. It's nice to think that I'm moving away from that now. Solving this, we're blood nuts hunted down in the early days. That's why there aren't many redheads now. There's something gone on there, isn't there? I mean, there were a bunch found in New Zealand hundreds of years ago hiding. So something's gone down somewhere where the gingers have been hunted down and slaughtered. Yeah, absolute Solomist. And evening to you. Anthony DeMorse says, that story about May, Merkel, Obama, etc. is very similar to the plot of the boys from Brazil, yeah, except they were clones of Hitler, yeah. It is, and it's not a new thing, this. It's been out for a long time, this stuff. So, yeah, quite right. Perhaps there's no investigative in German on YouTube, Mandela Effect, biographic software analysis. He proposed Mandela died in prison and Obama's Kenyan father was... No, I don't buy that at all. I don't even think he was in prison for that long. He was brought to a meeting in Melrose House in Somerset in either 1986 or 87. Was asked if he wanted to play the role of president, which he did. And the first thing he did was put the South African economy $5 billion in debt to the IMF and purchase weapons. And a lot of that was for domestic control. So... No, I'm not so sure about that, my friend. I'm not. We are the authentic versions of ourselves and they can't patent that. No, but they can when they've stuffed that shit in you. In Kubrick's Shining, the possessed dad, armed with an axe, traced the boy's carbon footprint in the labyrinth. The boy tricked him and escaped. The man lost in the labyrinth and froze. Unless you're trapped, you're tapped and have your own very own Bluetooth identification. Yeah. Okay. Right, chaps. So, excellent. I hope we did have a good season. And now we're in the middle of just started a new number. Let's crack on. Let's Year of the Horse, shedding last year. Now the horse is all about movement, passion and power. Get on it. This is your year to get that energy behind you. And hopefully you've shedded all the shit that you didn't need that was just baggage. And we can only move forward. Thanks for joining. Mods, thanks for modding. And I hope you have a good week. And I shall see you, as always, till the next time.
electronic engineering, electronic engineering, electronic engineering.